Miners vanished in 1962. 50 years later, a sealed room was found inside the abandoned mine. In the spring of 1962, 17 men walked into the heart of a mountain in West Virginia. They never came out. 50 years later, a dusty file and a forgotten name would reveal the truth that the mountain didn't take them. Something far more human did. Maidawan, West Virginia, April 23, 1962. The sun rose over the ridges, like it always had, brushing the tops of pine and hickory with gold. Smoke curled from stovepipes in the narrow hollows. Dogs barked, roosters crowed, and 17 men kissed their wives goodbye before heading into the belly of Blackwater Mine. No one knew it was the last time they'd be seen alive. Officially, the tragedy was recorded as a catastrophic methane gas explosion. The blast, according to reports, collapsed 3 tunnel shafts and cut off all access to the lower levels. Rescue attempts were abandoned after 48 hours. The mine was sealed. A plaque was placed on a rusted fence at the entrance. And life in Maidawan, a coal town clinging to the hem of the Appalachian Mountains, was told to move on. The coal company Cumberland Coal issued statement settlements and condolences. The local newspaper printed a 1-page spread with the words, "Blackwater Mine Disaster, God Rest Their Souls." The families wept, accepted their checks, and buried empty coffins. But not everyone forgot. Sheriff Danny Morrison had spent most of his life in Maidawan, the kind of place where outsiders meant people from the next town over, where high school football was religion and stories were currency passed down like family recipes. He never expected to uncover one that could burn the whole town to the ground. It started with a file room cleanup. The county had recently approved a grant for digitizing paper records. Danny, meticulous to a fault, volunteered to help sort the archives in the old courthouse basement. It was slow work sifting through decades of property disputes, moonshine arrests, and forgotten budget meetings. But that's when he found it. A thick manila folder, stamped Mingo County Sheriff's Dept. Incident Report, Blackwater Mine, April 1962. He nearly set it aside as a copy of the same story he'd grown up hearing. But something instinct maybe made him flip it open. Inside yellowed reports, old photographs, typed interviews, and near the bottom a casualty list. 17 names. 17 miners who perished in the explosion, and one of them stopped him cold. Morrison James Patrick, age 31, lead foreman. Danny stared. His grandfather. The man he'd been told died of a heart attack when Danny was 12. In Appalachia, family history runs alongside creeks and dirt roads. People don't forget who's kin to who, but they also don't talk much about shame or secrets. Danny's father had never mentioned the mine, never talked about his dad working underground. The family story was James Morrison built homes, good with his hands, died early, bad heart. So why was his name listed as the lead foreman at the site of the worst mining disaster in county history? The report only deepened the mystery. Tucked in the back was a handwritten note. Investigation incomplete. Discrepancies in timeline. Recommend further inquiry. Deputy R. Collins beneath it in darker ink, case closed. No further investigation. Sheriff T. Hawkins Danny leaned back in his chair. His stomach churned. Something wasn't right. In a place like Maidawan, silence isn't just a habit, it's survival. The coal companies had long ruled with a mix of wages and warnings. Speak against the company and you'd find yourself out of work. Or worse. The older generation had grown up in this pressure cooker of loyalty, religion, and fear. Miners kept their heads down and did their job. When something happened, an accident, a disappearance, most folks believed it was better not to ask too many questions. But Danny had worn a badge long enough to recognize when a story moved too fast and settled too clean. Blackwater had been sealed the day after the explosion. Settlements paid within 3 weeks. No lawsuits, no appeals, no federal review. In a country where mine disasters usually triggered months of investigations, this one had been buried faster than the bodies. if there had been any bodies at all. The mine itself sat 5 miles from town, off Route 52. The roads leading there had crumbled over the decades. What was left of the operation now rested beneath rusting machinery and moss-covered fences. Nature, as it does in Appalachia, had slowly reclaimed the scars. Danny had never been there. He'd passed it as a kid, of course, but his father had always warned him away. Nothing there but ghosts and bad luck, he'd said. Now Danny wondered if it was something else. He flipped through the remaining pages of the file. Geological surveys, diagrams, mineral composition charts. Most of it was too technical to decipher, but a repeated phrase caught his eye: high-grade uranium ore. Estimated value 2.3 million ton, 1962. Danny exhaled sharply. Uranium. During the height of the Cold War. This wasn't about coal anymore. Route 52 twisted through the West Virginia hills like a cracked spine, winding past rusted bridges and forgotten hollers. Sheriff Danny Morrison had driven it 1,000 times before, but this time was different. This time he wasn't chasing a drunk driver or a noise complaint. He was chasing ghosts. The old Blackwater mine site sat just outside the county line, buried beneath 5 decades of dust and silence. It had become a local legend spoken of in hushed tones by old-timers at the diner or in half-joking warnings to children. Keep away from Blackwater, they'd say. The mountain don't forget. Danny didn't believe in ghosts, but he did believe in secrets. And whatever had happened at Blackwater in 1962, it hadn't been a simple accident. Not with his grandfather's name on that casualty list. Not with uranium surveys buried in sheriff's office files. Not with a handwritten note recommending further investigation and another one shutting it down. The sheriff's cruiser bumped over broken asphalt and gravel weeds, clawing through the cracks. The sign was still there. Cumberland Coal Company, authorized personnel only. Spray-painted underneath in red danger, keep out. Danny parked at the gate. The hinges groaned as he pushed it open, boots crunching on gravel and coal dust. The air was thick with pine mildew and something older, something stale. 50 years of quiet. Ahead, the mine entrance loomed, a steel and concrete wall sealing the shaft like a tomb. Reinforced beams crisscrossed the opening. It didn't look like a standard closure. It looked like a fortress. He ran a gloved hand over the concrete. Stamped into the lower edge were 2 dates, April 24th, 1962, April 25th, 1962. Danny frowned. The official report said rescue attempts continued for several days after the explosion. But if they started sealing the mine within 24 hours, who were they trying to save? Or what were they trying to hide? He took out his phone and snapped photos. Concrete seams, steel reinforcements, rusted tools scattered nearby. Then he circled the site searching for anything out of place. That's when he saw it, a figure in the tree line, 60 yards away. Tall, thin, motionless, wearing faded work clothes and a baseball cap pulled low. Danny raised a hand. "Hey, you okay over there?" The figure stepped back into the woods without a sound, gone, like smoke. Instinct kicked in. Danny's hand moved to the grip of his sidearm. Years in law enforcement had taught him one thing: when people watched from the shadows, they were rarely innocent. He moved quickly back to his cruiser eyes, scanning the forest edge. Back at the sheriff's office, the fluorescent lights felt harsher than usual. Danny spread the Blackwater file across his desk, incident reports, settlement records, survey documents, and the old photo of the mine crew. He found himself staring at his grandfather's face, younger than he remembered. Proud, steady, his radio crackled. Sheriff Morrison copy, he picked it up. "Go ahead." Got a call from the state mining inspector's office. Someone's requesting access to historical mine safety records, specifically about Blackwater. Danny's blood turned cold. Did they leave a name? Said he was from the state office. Name was Henderson. No callback number. Said he'd try again later. Danny set the radio down slowly. Henderson, one of the families listed in the Blackwater incident. One of the names he'd tried calling that afternoon, only to find no trace of the family still in town. Someone was watching. He turned back to the survey documents. Most of the technical jargon was meaningless to him, but one phrase appeared over and over: high-grade uranium, high commercial value, strategic resource. In 1962, the United States had been in the middle of the Cold War. The arms race with the Soviet Union was white-hot. Nuclear stockpiles were growing. And uranium wasn't just valuable, it was vital. What if the Blackwater explosion had been a cover? What if Cumberland Coal or someone higher had discovered something they weren't supposed to? And what if 17 men found out he flipped to the settlement agreements again? All families compensated by May 15, 1962, less than 3 weeks after the explosion. No lawsuits, no appeals. That wasn't just efficient, that was controlled. Danny picked up the phone and called the West Virginia Department of Mining Safety. A woman named Betty Mason answered. Blackwater Mine, she repeated. That name rings a bell, but let me check the records. Danny waited. That's odd, Betty said. I'm not seeing any incident reports for a Blackwater mine in 1962. Are you sure about the name? I'm looking at the sheriff's report right now, Danny said. 17 dead, April 23rd. Well, sir, I've been maintaining these archives for over 30 years. If there was a fatal incident in 1962, it would be here. But according to our database, there's nothing. Danny clenched his jaw. What about the Cumberland Coal Company? More typing. They operated a site in Maidawan, yes. But according to our records, that operation was officially closed on April 22, 1962. Danny stared at the report in front of him. The explosion happened April 23rd. They closed the mine the day before the accident. That's what it says. No incident, no record of deaths, and a mine that, according to the state, shouldn't have even been active on the day of the explosion. Danny thanked her and hung up, heart-pounding. The story the town had believed for 50 years was a lie. That night he couldn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling fan turning slowly above his bed, the room lit only by the dull glow of the alarm clock. 3:17 a.m., his phone buzzed. Unknown number, he answered. Sheriff Morrison. A voice came through, old but clear. I heard you've been asking questions about the mine. Danny sat up. Who is this? Name's Carl Hutchkins. I worked at Blackwater in '62. We need to talk. You're poking something that doesn't want to be poked. Are you threatening me? I'm warning you. There's a difference. Where? The old diner on Route 119, 10 miles north. 8 o'clock tonight. Come alone. The line went dead. Danny stared at the screen. He had just been handed a key to a locked door that had stayed shut for half a century, and he was about to open it. The old diner on Route 119 hadn't served a plate of hash or a cup of coffee in over 20 years. Its neon sign buzzed faintly, one flickering letter hanging by a thread. The parking lot was cracked and half swallowed by weeds, the only light coming from a pair of dusty flood lamps mounted to the roof. It was the kind of place forgotten by time, swallowed by the mountains, just like those men in 1962. Sheriff Danny Morrison arrived 15 minutes early. He circled the lot, once eyes sweeping for vehicles' exits, anything off. A single pickup truck sat near the edge of the building, its cab dark. He parked near the entrance, engine idling, and unfastened the snap on his holster, just in case. At 8:00 p.m., sharp, a man stepped out from behind the diner. Tall, thin, older than Danny expected, mid-70s maybe. His white hair stuck out from beneath a cap that said Union Strong. His hands were calloused and shaking slightly, but his gait was steady. This man had worked with his hands his whole life and seen things he'd spent decades trying to forget. Sheriff Morrison, he said. Mr. Hutchkins. They shook hands. Hutchkins's grip was surprisingly strong. You're braver than I was at your age, the old man said. Or maybe just more stubborn. Danny gestured toward a picnic table in the shadows. They sat. The silence stretched. You were supposed to be there that day, Danny began. I was Hutchkins said. April 23, 1962, day shift. But I'd eaten bad eggs the night before. Sick as a dog. Called in, felt guilty all morning. Danny leaned in. So you went to the mine anyway? Yeah, around noon. Thought maybe they'd need a hand for the swing shift. Thought maybe I could make it up to James. His eyes flicked toward Danny. Your grandfather. Danny's breath caught. You knew him, everybody did. Best foreman we ever had. Fair, no nonsense, didn't take bribes from Cumberland like some others. The air grew heavy. So Danny said there was no explosion. Carl Hutchkins laughed bitter and low. No, Sheriff, there wasn't. That's just the story they sold the town. I got to the mine around lunchtime, Hutchkins said, staring out into the trees beyond the parking lot. Expected to see the usual bustle. Instead it was dead quiet. No machinery running, no voices, just quiet. He paused, eyes distant. Then I heard it. Gunshots. Not just one or two, a lot of them, rapid, controlled, like military. Danny froze. I ducked behind the equipment shed. Didn't know what the hell was going on. Thought maybe it was some kind of robbery or labor bust-up. But then I saw them, men in suits. Rifles slung over their shoulders, coming up from the mine shaft. Calm, precise, like they'd done this before. Danny swallowed, and the miners never saw them. But I didn't have to. I knew they were still down there. Knew they weren't coming back up. The old man wiped his hands on his jeans. Then came the trucks, black unmarked. More men, not miners, not locals, hauling out crates, file boxes, something heavy wrapped in canvas. I counted at least 3 trucks loaded. Then the cement mixers arrived. Danny leaned forward. They sealed the mine, sealed it tight. Steel beams, reinforced concrete, the works. I watched Sheriff Hawkins, your predecessor, stand there and supervise the whole thing. He was giving orders like he was the foreman. Danny's jaw tightened. Hawkins shut down the investigation. Overrode Deputy Collins. Collins was the only one who tried to raise hell. 3 months later, his car wrapped around a tree on a straight road in clear weather. Danny's stomach turned, and the company man, he asked. Harold Vance was there too, in the middle of it. I saw him hand Hawkins an envelope, thick one. They told us it was Cole, Hutchkins said. But we all knew that wasn't true. Something was off. The dust, the tools they brought in, the inspectors that came from Washington. Danny nodded. Uranium. More than that. Rare stuff. Strange colored ore. Rock that shimmered under light. James, your grandfather, he was worried. Said we were digging up something we didn't understand. Danny's heart pounded. He tried to get someone to listen. He took samples. Wrote notes. Even sent some to a geology professor at the state university. That's when the feds showed up. 3 days before the incident, Danny said, recalling his grandfather's letter. Hutchkins nodded. They made their offer. Relocation. New names. Big checks. Most of the crew said no. We weren't criminals. We just wanted answers. So they killed them. Every one of them. Shot down like dogs underground. Sealed away like they never existed. Danny looked at the old man. Why didn't you say something before Carl Hutchkins's face darkened? You think I didn't try? I went to the state police. To a newspaper in Charleston. A reporter started digging. Died of a heart attack a week later. 31 years old. He looked Danny in the eye. They had reached Sheriff. Still do. From his coat pocket, Hutchkins pulled out a small brass object and set it on the table. It was a shell casing. .30-06 caliber, military issue. Found it near the mine entrance. Picked it up before they poured the concrete. Danny turned it over. Markings still visible after 50 years. That's not all, Hutchkins added. He pulled a folded piece of yellowed paper from his jacket and handed it over. A geological survey. Danny unfolded it. Circled in red, high-grade uranium, 2.7% by weight. Estimated reserves, 47,000 tons. Estimated market value, $127 million 1962 USD. Danny let out a low whistle. That's just the uranium, Hutchkins said. There were other minerals too, ones we couldn't identify. Military-grade stuff, rare earths. You can't publish this on your own, Hutchkins said. Not yet. You need real protection. Backup. Once they know you're onto them, they'll come after you like they came after me. They already are, Danny said. Someone called the office asking if I was investigating old mines. No number. Name was Henderson. Hutchkins went pale. Bill Henderson's widow refused to sign the settlement. Said she wanted a proper investigation. 3 months later, her house burned down with her and the kids inside. Electrical fire, Danny stood, the shell casing and document clutched in his hand. I'm not letting this go, he said. They killed my grandfather. They killed his crew. They don't get to bury this forever. Hutchkins nodded slowly. Then be careful, Sheriff, because if you're not, they'll make sure you join them. Sheriff Danny Morrison didn't go straight home after the meeting at the diner. He took the long way back, weaving through dark back roads and winding ridgelines, checking his mirrors every half mile. He didn't see headlights behind him, but that didn't mean no one was following. The kind of people Carl Hutchkins had described, the kind who sealed men behind concrete and erased them from public records, didn't need to be seen to be dangerous. When he finally pulled into his driveway, it was nearly midnight. His house sat just outside Maidawan, nestled under a stand of trees that had grown wild and thick over the years. He parked in the shadows and cut the engine. Silence. Then his phone buzzed. Unknown number, he let it ring, let it go to voicemail. But seconds later his police radio crackled. Sheriff Morrison, you there? He keyed the mic. Go ahead. Had a call just come in. Guy says he's from the state mining office. Asked if you were investigating old mine sites today. Danny's blood ran cold. What name did he give Henderson? Said he'd call back later. No number. That name again. That wasn't a coincidence. That was a message. He looked toward the woods beyond his property line. Someone was watching. The next morning, Danny returned to the sheriff's office. The first thing he did was check the file drawer where he'd stashed the Blackwater documents. Something was off. The papers were rearranged, not obviously, just slightly askew, like someone had flipped through them and tried to put everything back exactly where it was. The smell of cologne hung faintly in the air. Danny didn't wear cologne. Someone had been in his office, someone with access. He locked the drawer again, grabbed the evidence Hutchkins had given him, the shell casing and the uranium survey, and tucked them into an inner pocket of his jacket. He wasn't going to leave them anywhere unattended again. Not now. He didn't have to wait long for the next move. That afternoon, as he was leaving the courthouse, a black sedan rolled slowly into the lot and parked beside his cruiser. A man stepped out, mid-40s, clean-cut, wearing a tailored suit and a badge clipped to his belt. Sheriff Morrison, the man said calmly. I think we need to talk. Danny kept his distance. And you are Agent James Crawford, the man said, flashing his credentials. Federal Bureau of Investigation. Danny narrowed his eyes. FBI's got a strange way of showing up unannounced these days. Crawford gave a thin smile. We like to keep things efficient. You've been asking a lot of questions, digging into very old incidents, stirring up things that were settled long ago. Danny didn't flinch. 17 men were murdered. My grandfather was one of them. That doesn't sound very settled to me. Crawford's smile faded. Walk with me, Sheriff. Reluctantly, Danny followed him across the lot. Crawford spoke quietly, like a man delivering a favor he didn't want to give. I'm going to say something to you off the record. Call it professional courtesy. Go on. The Blackwater mine incident wasn't an accident. It was a classified operation, a matter of national security. Danny stopped walking. So you're admitting it. Crawford turned to him. I'm telling you that during the Cold War, decisions were made to protect this country. Strategic materials were discovered, materials essential to our defense programs. The miners who found out were not cleared for that information. So you killed them. They were given the opportunity to relocate, new identities, full compensation. That's not what happened. Some refused. They became a threat. Danny stared at him. My grandfather was one of them. Yes, Crawford said flatly. James Morrison refused the deal. He said he'd go public. He left us no choice. Danny clenched his fists. You're confessing to a federal murder. I'm reminding you, Crawford said that your grandfather died in service to this country, just like a soldier on a classified mission. We just couldn't give him a medal for it. They reached the edge of the lot. Crawford's expression darkened. This is the part where I give you your choice, Sheriff. What choice you walk away. Drop the investigation. Lock up the files and forget this ever happened. In return, your life stays quiet. Your family stays safe. You keep your badge. Maybe even get promoted someday. And if I don't, Crawford smiled again, but this time it was cold. Then you'll have an accident. Maybe fall into an old shaft while poking around an abandoned mine. Tragic, but not uncommon. Danny's hand hovered near his sidearm. That sounds like a threat. It's a reality, Crawford said. This isn't about you anymore. It's about the people behind this operation, people still in power, people who have protected this secret for 50 years. He stepped back toward the sedan. You have 24 hours. After that, the offer expires. Danny called after him. What about Carl Hutchkins? Crawford paused. He's no longer available. And then he got in his car and drove off. Danny stood in the parking lot, fists clenched, chest tight. They were already making moves. He called his father. Dad, I need to ask you about Grandpa. There was a long pause. What about him? How did he really die? More silence. Danny, there are things better left buried. No, Danny said. There are 17 families who deserve to know the truth. His father's voice turned sharp. Drop this. You don't know who you're dealing with. I do now, Danny said. And they just threatened my life. His father didn't respond for a long time. Then quietly he said, Your grandfather tried to do the right thing. It got him killed. That night, Danny packed a go bag and placed the Blackwater evidence inside a hidden compartment under his truck seat. He drove out to his parents' house, made them pack, and sent them to Charleston. Don't call anyone. Don't tell anyone where you're going. Just go. His father stood on the porch, looking tired and haunted. You're just like him, you know. Danny nodded. I hope so. As he turned to leave, he noticed a dark sedan parked under a street lamp down the road. Crawford's people, watching, waiting. He got in his truck and drove toward town. The sedan followed, maintaining distance. Danny didn't look back. If they wanted a war, they were going to get one. The old grandfather clock in Aunt Ruth's kitchen had ticked the same solemn rhythm for over 50 years. It stood in the corner, like a silent sentinel, its brass pendulum swinging behind dusty glass. Danny had always thought it was just an antique. Now he knew better. His Aunt Ruth James Morrison's sister was 86 and sharp as a tack. She lived alone in a house filled with lace curtains, faded photographs, and quiet regrets. She answered the door in slippers and a housecoat, blinking at Danny with equal parts confusion and dread. I need to ask you about Grandpa, Danny said softly. She didn't say a word, just stepped aside and let him in. When the door closed behind him, she locked it, top bolt and bottom latch. Then she pulled the curtain back an inch and peered into the night. They've been by already, she whispered. 2 men, dark suits. Asked if I still had the clock. Danny stiffened. What did you tell them? I told them I'd given it to Goodwill, she said. Then I watched them drive past twice more in an hour. She turned and faced him, her eyes wet but steady. Your grandfather gave me something the night before he disappeared, she said. Told me to keep it safe and to give it to someone in the family, someone who wouldn't be afraid to finish what he started. She crossed the kitchen, opened the back of the clock, and pulled out a small brass key. Danny took it, heart-pounding. Etched into the metal were 3 numbers, 247. What does it open? Ruth smiled faintly. Safety deposit box. First National Bank. Logan County. Registered under Patrick Morrison, his middle name, and our maiden name. Everything he documented is in that box. Danny stared at it, like it might burn a hole in his palm. This is it, isn't it? Ruth nodded. You need to be careful, Danny. They'll do anything to make sure that box never sees daylight. He slipped the key into his jacket. I'm going to finish this. Ruth reached for his hand. Then promise me something. Anything. If you disappear, make sure someone knows what happened. Don't let them erase you like they did your grandfather. Danny didn't sleep that night. Instead, he parked 3 blocks away from his aunt's house and waited. A dark sedan rolled by just after midnight. Slowed. Didn't stop. Then it circled the block again at 2:00 a.m. By dawn, Danny was already on the road to Logan County. He didn't take the highway. He took old mining roads, zigzagging through forgotten towns, past rusted silos and half-collapsed barns. If they were tracking his phone, he'd already disabled GPS. If they were watching his vehicle, he'd covered his plates with mud. He was racing the clock and Agent Crawford. The First National Bank opened at 9:00 a.m. He parked 2 blocks away, entered a coffee shop, and sat by the window watching. At 8:40, 2 men in suits stepped into the bank. Crawford's people. At 8:59, Danny crossed the street. He entered the bank calmly, past the brass-trimmed door and the paneled walls that hadn't changed since the 1960s. Inside, the agents were already talking to the branch manager, Mr. Patterson, who looked increasingly nervous. Danny approached the teller window. I need access to a safety deposit box, he said, flashing his badge. Box 247, registered to Patrick Morrison. The teller hesitated. That's actually, I think our manager... No time for that, Danny said, raising his voice slightly. This is part of a homicide investigation tied to a federal conspiracy. I need access immediately. That got everyone's attention. The 2 agents turned, eyes narrowing. One of them stepped forward. Sheriff Morrison, we're here on behalf of Agent Crawford. National security matter. We'll handle this. Danny didn't budge. You've already handled it. For 50 years. Now it's my turn. The agents flanked him. Step into the manager's office, please. Danny didn't move. He pulled the key from his pocket and handed it to the teller. Box 247, now. Patterson approached, sweating. Gentlemen, maybe we should. Danny turned to him. You want to be part of covering up 17 murders, because if you delay this, you're aiding and abetting a conspiracy. The teller blinked, then disappeared into the vault corridor with Patterson. One of the agents reached for his radio. Danny's voice turned sharp. Don't even think about it. You try to stop me, I'll place you under arrest right now. They locked eyes, but the agents hesitated. For just a moment he had them. Minutes later, inside the vault, Danny stood before box 247. Patterson was pale. Do I need to witness? Yes, Danny said. You're my insurance policy. He inserted the key. Turned it. The latch clicked. He opened the box. Inside, wrapped in waxed cloth and old envelopes, was everything his grandfather had died protecting. Photographs, geological surveys, lab reports, audio reels, signed execution orders on federal letterhead, and on top a letter. To whoever finds this. The letter was yellowed with age, the ink faded but still legible. Danny unfolded it with trembling fingers. It was signed James P. Morrison. If you're reading this, then you already know. We weren't just mining coal. We uncovered something that scared them: strategic metals, uranium, maybe more. They told me to keep quiet. I couldn't. I had to protect the men, protect the truth. If I disappear, let it be for a reason. Let it mean something. Danny swallowed hard. Behind him, Patterson whispered, Sheriff. They're back. Footsteps echoed down the marble hall. Boots, heavy, intentional. Danny grabbed the documents, stuffed them into his duffel, and sealed the safety deposit box behind him. He turned to Patterson. There's a back exit, isn't there? Patterson nodded. Through the boiler room. Take this, Danny said, shoving a flash drive into his hand. Give it to every paper, every TV station in the state. If I don't come back by tomorrow, you run with it. Wait, what about you? I'll keep them busy. Danny burst into the alley behind the bank, just as the agents came in through the main doors. He ran not aimlessly but toward the edge of town, toward the old county broadcast tower. It had been decommissioned years ago, but Danny knew it still worked. The emergency signal was connected directly to the regional feed reserved for disasters, floods, chemical leaks. Today the disaster was truth. He climbed 3 flights of rusted stairs, wind howling through broken panes. At the top, he slammed the switch on the old emergency transmitter and fed in the drive. Photos of Blackwater, signed memos, audio recordings of interviews, a confession, his grandfather's voice, grainy but unmistakable, explaining the entire cover-up. 17 men buried alive for profit, buried for power. This wasn't an accident, it was a decision. Seconds later, Danny heard the sirens. SUVs skidded into the gravel lot. Men in black stormed the tower boots, pounding up the stairs. He barricaded the door with a steel cabinet, then stood at the console as the files transmitted to every emergency broadcast station in the region. The broadcast hit at 9:47 a.m. By 10:00, local radio hosts were scrambling. TV anchors broke into programming. Twitter exploded. And across West Virginia, people heard the name James Morrison for the first time in 50 years. A hero, a whistleblower, a man erased by silence. The door finally gave way. Crawford stood in the wreckage, gun drawn. "You have no idea what you've done." Danny turned slowly. "I think I do." Crawford's hand trembled, but he didn't fire. Outside, more sirens approached state police journalists, maybe more. "It's over," Danny said. Crawford stared for a long second, then he lowered his weapon. In the months that followed, the fallout was staggering. Congressional hearings were launched. Several federal officials were indicted. The families of the Blackwater miners received formal apologies and compensation, and a bill was signed into law, the Morrison Act, to ensure no federally sanctioned mining operation would ever again be shielded from public oversight. They never found Crawford after that day. But Danny didn't care. He visited the new memorial built outside the Blackwater site. 17 names carved into black stone, and beneath them, "Truth buried is truth delayed but never destroyed." He placed his grandfather's brass key at the base. The mountain was finally done whispering. Now it roared.